Hello, everyone who is here already. My name is Renaissance. I'm with Seattle Solidarity Budget. We're giving it just a minute for all the live stream back end tech to get set up and situated so that we can run our webinar and our panel smoothly. And we'll be getting started here in just a couple of minutes. Please just vibe out with the music while we're getting everything situated for y'all. Thank y'all for being here. Hello, everybody. It's Renaissance with Seattle Solidarity Budget. We'll be getting going in just a couple of minutes. Please just vibe out with the music for a moment, and then we'll get our panel underway. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Renaissance, and I am an organizer with Seattle Solidarity Budget. Thank you for joining us tonight. We've gathered an incredibly knowledgeable and diverse panel to answer questions regarding Mayor Harrell's plan to implement surveillance technology in Seattle. The comment feature will be functional during the webinar for interaction and conversational purposes. If time allows, we will answer questions once the webinar is concluded. Additionally, if you're connected to Solidarity Budget on socials or have endorsed our Stop Surveillance City letter to Seattle officials, you have what you need to contact us. You can also access the detailed documents we've created with information on these surveillance technologies. Please be kind in the comment sections. Seattle Solidarity Budget is an abolitionist organization actively working to undo harms rather than to perpetuate them. There is lots of conflict surrounding land acknowledgements, namely that merely acknowledging is not enough. Often acknowledgements miss what we are actually doing to undo the harms of past and present, and how we are working toward restoration or restorative justice, that is, to restore to the conditions prior to the harm. Are you paying real rent? Are you actively working toward land back? Are you responding to and honoring the calls of the local peoples wherever you are located? Do you know the names of the peoples whose land you're on? Do you know any of their stories? It is important not to forget how we got here or what our predecessors have done, the genocides and enslavements that have occurred, or the harms that continue to hurt many of our people today. Seattle and the neighboring cities are occupying the stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the ancestral lands of Duwamish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, Muckleshoot, Snohomish, Tulalip, and Puyallup peoples. We honor them by learning their stories and remembering that we have the responsibility to remedy these injustices. They have been here since time immemorial and have the collective memory that many of the earliest laws were written to deprive them of humanity and to criminalize their very existence, a practice still very much alive today. We have our work cut out for us, but together, we will get there. Seattle Solidarity Budget is a cross movement coalition that came together in the wake of the 2020 uprising. We bring together housing justice, transit justice, climate justice, labor, human service providers, and racial justice groups, among others. We refuse to be pitted against each other, and we are fighting for a city budget that rises to the level of the intersectional crises we face. This year, we are fighting for a budget that matters. We are pursuing a city budget that ends the record deaths of unhoused folks, that ends the record deaths of those in our county jail, and that ends the record deaths of pedestrians and cyclists. We are fighting for a budget that prioritizes care for our younger and our older people alike, that provides food security, enables climate resiliency, and that makes healthcare accessible. It makes absolutely no sense that a person needs to have contact with police officers to gain access to treatment facilities, or that people dealing with addiction, when attempting to access treatment services, are brought into contact with the police. Those are harm escalation practices, not harm reduction. We know that a budget that achieves this requires we divest from punishment systems, including cops, courts, and cages. It also requires investing in meeting people's basic needs, like a guaranteed basic income, for example. If you want to learn more, check out the video on our website under the Education tab. In 2023, the Seattle City Council approved Mayor Harrell's proposal of allocating at least $1.8 million to deploy surveillance technologies throughout the city. Gunshot detection systems such as ShotSpotter, along with CCTV cameras, are at the top of Harrell's list, with the plan of bringing these technologies through real-time crime centers, otherwise known as RTCC. Now, don't worry if these terms are new to you, because today we are going to talk about these various surveillance systems, what they are, how they work, and how they produce rather than prevent harm. We will further be addressing how they impact our communities and our community members, and solutions that are community-based and led from some of the people who are actively working to make a difference here in Seattle. We're going to start by having each of our panelists tell us the interest they have in keeping surveillance technology out of our community. What is it about surveillance of community members and the issues of justice that motivate you to do the community work you do and to be here with us today? We will begin with Ayan, an elder in training, anti-racist community organizer who supports our community from a restorative justice framework, an African Muslim social worker, parent, sibling, and community auntie. Ayan, would you please share with us a little bit about what motivates you to do the work that you do?
What motivates me really is our children, our elders, our everyday people. That's why I do this work. This affects us in different ways. So that's really why I'm doing this work. I'm not doing it for the glamour. There is no glamour in it. And for those of us that have been doing it forever, we understand that we're going to end up going against systems. So this is labor of love in different ways. I'm going to step back and pass the buck to another person. Maybe Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Ayan. Next up, we have Mr. Gregory Davis, a longtime resident of Rainier Beach, the chief strategist with the Rainier Beach Action Coalition, which stewards the Rainier Beach Neighborhood Plan and is focused on neighborhood engagement and empowerment. Mr. Davis is also a founding member of the Rainier Beach, A Beautiful Safe Space, which is a community-led, non-arrest crime prevention approach to reduce incidents that contribute to youth violence in the Rainier Beach neighborhood of Seattle. Mr. Davis, would you please share with us what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Ayan, and peace to everybody who's on the panel and listening. Um, we wanted to lift up the hopes and dreams of the residents in Rainier Beach for what they desired to have happen in their neighborhood. We wanted them to have a voice. We wanted them to feel connected. We wanted them to be able to provide community-led uh, interventions, and so we were able to do that. And so that's the motivator. We started this 13 years ago. Um, there was an opportunity to get an update of the Rainier Beach Neighborhood Plan, and we jumped on it as a neighborhood, one of three neighborhoods that had that chance. And it was about this time where George Mason University was actually doing research in Seattle, of all places, looking at, they did a longitudinal study on street segments in Seattle. And they discovered that 60% of the crimes happened at 4% of the places. And so these two opportunities merged for us. We blended them. We applied um, the theory in our neighborhood. We were able to hire young people to implement some of those strategies. And we just want to be true to the hopes and dreams of the resident neighborhood. We made sure that we spent money on evaluation and data so that we can have results for times just as this. And so we look forward to talking to you more as the rest of the evening proceeds.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Next, we'll hear from Nikita Oliver, who is the executive director and lead attorney at Creative Justice, an arts-based, youth-driven healing and restorative justice space for youth and young adults targeted by the criminal punishment system and other carceral institutions. Nikita, would you tell us what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Well, first of all, good evening, y'all. And I'm literally at work. Just finished program here at Creative Justice, so I apologize for the delay, but the young people come first. And very honored to share any space with Auntie Ayan and the Mr. Davis, the mayor of Rainier Beach, and grateful to each of y'all for this opportunity. Um, Honestly, Creative Justice started because of the No New Youth Jail movement. And I can't talk about the work that we do without honoring the young people from Epic, organizers from Wish, um, she who will not be named publicly, but she knows who she is, for getting us organized to be able to fight the building of a new children's jail here in King County, I believe in 2012. And while that jail still was built, the organizing work of those organizers over a period of about 8 years helped people see the vision of a world where instead of punishing young people, we made sure that young people's needs were met, their basic needs: housing, healthcare, education, their cultural needs, their connection to community, relationships, high quality education that sees them as whole people, that we actually start doing the work of meeting their basic needs. Um, and addressing the things that drive young people into the school to prison pipeline, rather than punishing them for a system that was built on white supremacy and anti-Blackness and capitalism that has been targeting them since before they were even born. And so that movement and the education work and the organizing work that so many organizers did led some folks at For Culture to use public art dollars to invest in a think tank of community members, young people who had been in the juvenile carceral system, parents who had watched their young people suffer in the juvenile punishment system, one prosecutor, one judge, one public defender, and a lot of artists coming together and talking about the power of art to heal, the power of art to teach us about accountability, the power of art to bring us together. And Creative Justice was birthed. And so my commitment to this work comes out of knowing that the power of what happens when our commitment to healing and accountability meets our commitment to meeting folks' needs, actually creates a world in which people can thrive. And we know that harm does happen, hurt does happen. And so the other side of creative justice work is, how do we skill ourselves and our community up to heal harm when it occurs, so that we don't fall victim to hurt people. And so when we think about interpersonal violence, a lot of what we see is people who have experienced systemic hurt then place that on the people in our communities that we're closest to. And how do we do the work of intervening on that? And for me as an artist, leveraging our tools of creativity to both heal those harms and that hurt, and to imagine and manifest a world that is beyond prisons and police. And sometimes that seems like a far off world. And yet at the same time, when I'm sitting with young people in space like tonight, and there are situations that occur, the way they de-escalate themselves, the way they de-escalate each other, the way that they make agreements and resolution before they leave the space, actually proves to me that it is possible to build a world in which we intervene when harm can occur, we heal harm when it does occur, and we do the work to prevent harm from occurring. And if we could do those three things, I deeply believe we can get to a place where we're not using punitive or carceral systems to respond to crisis in our communities. So that is what motivates me, and I think what motivates our team at Creative Justice.
I'm trying to think how to respond after that. Thank you for that beautiful description, Nikita. Next, I'd like to hear from Nia Angelique, who's an organizer with the Seattle MLK Organizing Coalition, and Who Streets Our Streets, a BIPOC-led community group working at the intersection of transportation, traffic, and police brutality to limit the size and scope of the police and their harmful interactions with our community members. Nia, would you please share a little bit with us about what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Of course, and thank you. And I agree with trying to process after Nikita and think about what to say next, because powerful, very powerful. But for me personally, it did also start with injustices in the community, but also recognizing that there are issues that some people have never even considered to be an issue. So doing a lot of community work and working with people in the community to understand the issues that they may have and to help advocate for them and get the resources that they may need. And then really just to solve the issues where they begin. So with the work that I'm doing now, that's working with automated traffic enforcement and the surveillance issues surrounding that, that kind of cross over into what we'll be discussing today. But overall, just helping to advocate for the community and hear what they actually have to say and putting them in positions to be able to advocate for themselves.
Thank you, Nia. And finally, and last but not least, we have Beryl Lipton, who's an investigative researcher with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, where she leverages freedom of information laws to investigate government transparency and law enforcement surveillance. Beryl, would you please share with us a little bit about what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Well, I think in part it is the work that all of you do and the type of communities and participation that occurs in the world, because I think I'm just very honored to be a part of this group because I think, like everyone here, I think it's still possible to craft a fair society, and that participation is very important to that, the community's participation. And surveillance is a way of undermining transparency, and it invades privacy. And I think for me, I'm really motivated by sort of those two elements, transparency and privacy. Apologize. Transparency contributes to the common ability to engage in conversations, to engage with policy. And it's important that we are able to have these conversations, and it allows people to be on the same page. I do a lot of work with Freedom of Information Act requests, and I really appreciate that there is some legislation that at least acknowledges that we are supposed to be able to participate and access the elements of the governing structure. And I also think that privacy is really important to being able to have these types of conversations, or to being able to craft personalities and just be in the world in a just and fair way. And so I think surveillance and the way that surveillance is adopted really undermines these things. And it's important that to the extent possible, we can be asking as many questions as we can about how it's being used and adopted and affecting all of us, uh, because the power structure is just really imbalanced right now.
Thank you so much, Beryl. And thank you all for being here with us today. You're all very busy doing the work that you do for our community. And I know it's a big ask for y'all to set aside some of the time that you're working on, like Nikita, just coming right off of it over there at Creative Justice. So thank you so much for being present with us today, for sharing. And to everybody who is chimed into the live stream, as promised, we were bringing you like a very knowledgeable, heavy hitter crew for today. With that, let's jump into it, shall we? I would like to begin with a brief explanation of the surveillance technology that Mayor Harrell is proposing to implement in Seattle. Currently, the proposal includes real-time crime center, a gunshot detection system, and an expansion to the CCTV cameras, adding to the already existing license plate readers. Beryl, can you give us a brief description of the technologies we are discussing and how they work?
Yeah, so these technologies are sort of increasingly working together, and I really genuinely appreciate the opportunity to be able to share some of what I know about these, because I think they're all very interrelated. So surveillance, right, in general, sort of depends on um, having access to what we're doing at any given time, and technology has expanded to such an extent that it is increasingly very easy for that data to be collected. And we know that from sort of the private market. We know that from the way that we are tracked with our cell phones and online. And increasingly, there are these systems that are being implemented in public spaces where there is some gray area about our reasonable expectation of privacy, that are designed to collect essentially as much information, audio and visual, as possible. So when we think about gunshot detection systems, these are essentially systems that are designed with many microphones placed across different areas, that are supposedly sort of designed to collect sounds and use artificial intelligence to determine whether a gunshot has occurred. We know that this is very inaccurate. We know that the way that the accuracy rates are presented to law enforcement are created in a way that is not really statistically sound. We know that now, in a very recent report that from Wired, in which there was a leak of known ShotSpotter locations at the end, microphone locations at the end of last year, that a large portion of these are placed in areas where people identify as being people of color, Black, or Latino, or and generally low income. So I think with ShotSpotter, all of the things that we that are concerning about ShotSpotter in terms of where the microphones are placed, how the audio is actually captured and used and shared and stored, the actual effect on communities when law enforcement is receiving notifications from these systems saying that a gunshot has happened. Um, uh, you know, all of these things, are also uh, more recently, pretty provable. ShotSpotter, I guess I'll also talk about license plate readers. So license plate readers, you've probably seen something similar to them in speed cameras, or sometimes they exist on stoplights. They can be fixed, they can be attached to police officers' cars. And they essentially scan license plates. They can sometimes also identify the make of a car or other details. This is all generally stored in a database that provides a pretty strong record of where a particular vehicle has been in a particular time. And they're sold as a way to identify, stolen vehicles or other vehicles of interest. But we also know that the vast majority of the scans that occur, have nothing to do with any sort of crime, and they're just sort of accumulating information. And then camera networks. Municipalities have their own camera networks. Industry has its own camera network. Um, and so when we're looking or thinking about camera networks and real-time crime centers, and in particular, this company, Fusus, I think what we have to consider is that there is a desire to integrate all municipal cameras of some sort, and is probably as sort of enables live access to camera feeds. And it's really important to have sort of clear policies around sort of uh, who is accessing what. And I think sometimes it's not clear in other cities where Fusus has been adopted, sort of what the real rules and considerations are around how that data is being stored or shared or retained, whether that's being used in future models, because Fusus is very interested in artificial intelligence. And this basically comes back to a variation of predictive policing, which has also been debunked over again and is known to be incredibly flawed and detrimental to communities. So I think I just appreciate being able to share some of this, and I think it's really important as the conversation moves forward that as many questions as possible are being asked about what is going on with this, because sometimes it has been helpful in other situations for the decision makers to realize that they don't actually have the answers to some of these questions either.
Oh, that's a lot, but I think I'm understanding a little bit better and how some of these things are working together. Um, that Wired article is pretty spot on. It's pretty glaring. 70% of the folks that have a shot spotter are BIPOC or less than 50%, $50,000 in what they're earning. That's pretty glaring right in the face. Something that we've seen play out in other cities across the country is how implementing surveillance technology necessitates that more and more technology be added in the future. Can you speak to how this could impact Seattle financially?
Yes. So one of the sort of trends in the adoption of this surveillance technology is related to subscription costs. And so in much the same way, a lot of consumer models have moved to subscriptions. A lot of this technology also sort of runs on a subscription model. So there is a concern, right, about what the ongoing cost of some of these systems are going to be. Also, we are seeing sort of in general a kind of consolidation of the surveillance market. And so, for example, in Seattle, as far as I know, Seattle uses Axon body-worn cameras. And Axon is a very large police technology company. They also make tasers. And they have funded Fusus in the past and recently have sort of fully acquired Fusus. And so I think, when that kind of merger happens and that very sort of clear intention of data consolidation happens, it really sort of opens up a big question about like what else they're going to sort of try to add to that system, because part of Fusus's appeal for law enforcement is its integratability, its ability to sort of integrate data streams from the different surveillance tech they have.
I know that one of my concerns is the way that I've heard this tech advertised or talked about by city officials, by folks from the company, and what's happening right now in the surveillance impact report that was put out by SPD and the mayor and whatnot, which is, well, the three technologies together, they've never really been done together. So then if we do them together, then we're going to have different outcomes than the outcomes that have been shown to happen with acoustic gunshot location devices, over and over again. And what I hear in the form of argument is, if we just buy more, then it will work right. And I keep hearing that argument over and over again. And so then when it doesn't work, if they can still pass those same arguments on to the public, then what they're saying is all we need to do is spend more of your money and then it will work. And then when it doesn't work, they get to make the same argument. It's just a loop. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why it's really important as these conversations are playing out, because sometimes, there are other communities, right, where there is a push against surveillance, and it's always, there's always a strong push from law enforcement and from these companies, right? They have a financial interest in expanding the use of their technology. So it's it's really important as we're having these conversations that if they're going to say that this is going to be effective, there's also some way that they lay out how they're measuring that this is effective, and also how they are going to be able, even for themselves, be able to audit whether or not this is being abused or otherwise, not serving whatever a very clear purpose is supposed to be.
Thank you so much. Um, I know you're chiming in from a place where it's late, so really, really grateful that you're a part of this and sharing your expertise and your experience with all of these different forms of technology. Um, and I think it's important that we have a good understanding of what this technology is that's being presented to us. Um, and now I'd like to take a look at, and ask some of our other panelists what they have experience with in terms of how they've observed many of these technologies that we've been discussed so far being a threat to equitable public safety, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Acoustic gunshot detection systems such as ShotSpotter increase police presence and criminalization by increasing pat downs, searches, and law enforcement actions. In some cases, the police have even used the mere presence of ShotSpotter being in a neighborhood, alert or no alert by the system, to rationalize pre-context stop and frisk of people. In Seattle, the current proposed legislation locations for the CCTV cameras and AGLS microphones are Aurora Ave North between 85th and 145th, Belltown, the Chinatown International District, and the Downtown Commercial District. According to the City of Seattle Central Staff memo on the 2023-2024 biennial budget, specifically for the Seattle police budget, it clearly stated that these technologies might be moved after just 1 year. Ion, given all of your work in and with our migrant community in and around Seattle, um, with folks who came to the U.S. escaping from trauma imposed largely by the U.S., can you speak more to the dangers and harm of surveillance technology being put onto the communities that you've worked with?
So many of us, law enforcement is militant. And by militant, I really do mean the military in a different way. Well, if you really think about this country and the equipment they use and everything that they're using on us, what's the difference? Yet I'm the one that came from third world. All I have to say is we're actually in really dangerous grounds in different ways. Um, it's re-traumatizing people in different ways. Um, but more importantly, what about the brothers and sisters that are underdocumented too? How they feeling about it? They just sort of left that life and going through their own journey and restarting. Are you really trying to damage people in different ways, especially when Seattle loves to say we're liberal. Seattle loves to say we're a sanctioned state. Seattle loves to welcome everybody. Is that the welcome we're trying to bring? So we really need to be mindful. Um, Leadership needs to be thinking about this one in different ways, especially when you end up pushing for things that can harm communities of color that you really weren't trying to intentionally harm. I'm going to believe that it wasn't intentional, because to believe otherwise would mean that you really were harming sometimes, many times, your own selves. Because for the first time in Seattle, too, we have a lot of people of color in positions of power. What does that really look like? How do we move consciously? Um, I actually think it's time for us to just stop and really be mindful of what we're asking and what we're pushing for. This isn't the time to speed up. This isn't the time to like not listen to this group. This is something that's going to affect every last one of us. So there needs to be a different conversation. We need to slow down stuff. We can't just continue to move and operate in the same way.
Yeah, I don't think that it's folks who have a different experience than the people that grew up in the U.S. I don't think that's becoming much a part of the conversation. So I'm glad that we're talking about that now. And something that I heard that stuck out to me as you were talking is like surveillance is one of the first steps of control, like keeping people under constant surveillance to know that. And that form of control, especially from the experiences that we have, is a form of violence. It's like the beginning of the violence. Like you do not belong to yourself. You don't own yourself. And that's when you're sharing that, that's what's coming up in my heart, what's coming up in my stomach. Um, thank you for that. Nia, would you speak to some of the things that Who Streets, Our Streets has learned doing the participatory research that y'all have done in the Central District and the South End about surveillance and police interactions?
Yeah, of course. Exactly what Ayan is saying. People feel a complete invasion of privacy with these things, feeling like they're always being watched and just overall feeling uncomfortable. And then that increase of police presence in those areas isn't making anyone feel any safer. In fact, it's making them feel more unsafe because they have these biases that come from the police coming into these neighborhoods and treating those people poorly, racial stereotypes, things of that nature, just furthering their discomfort in the area. And then just always feeling like they are being watched. And then what's going on after they're gathering this information, and what are their images or whatever else may be being used for. People have all of these concerns. They would like to know what they're being used for. And then also knowing that there's no way for them to currently tell us exactly where that information is going or who's able to use that information, especially with certain people like ICE going across boundaries and taking that footage and using it for other things. It's really just pushing people to be even more uncomfortable. And then with recent developments of what AI is capable of now, and they're taking people's images and using them for elsewhere or other things without their consent and things of that nature. People are really just super uncomfortable with it and not willing to leave the house anymore or whatever the case may be, because they feel so uncomfortable from being watched in all these different aspects, and then just being uncomfortable with the police presence, like I said. So just making a lot of people feel shut in and shut out of decisions as well, because they're not being able to, have a voice in these things, or they don't know how to have a voice in these things. So you really just sit there and watch, or if they're even informed that these things are going on. So just paying attention to those things as well is a lot of the work that we do, and a lot of the work that we put in is to give these people the space to be able to communicate that these are the issues that they're having, or these are their concerns that they're having, or just not knowing about it at all and finding out from us that, cameras are being put in, or shot spotter is being put in, and not knowing what that is, or like I said, how that information can be used, just puts a big distrust from the community into the city as well as the state.
Something that I find really interesting. and revealing, knowing what I know about the work that Who Streets, Our Streets has done in Seattle, is that a lot of the work that y'all have been doing was on automated traffic enforcement cameras. And folks are already feeling a lack of trust, a lack of honor, complete fear, like, the whole panopticon thing. And right now what we're talking about is expanding that system throughout the city and giving access to all kinds of more people in much different ways. So I can only imagine that that's going to exponentially increase those negative feelings that people are walking around with on a daily basis. I can only imagine what that's going to do in our community, to the folks that are living in our community, to know that. Nikita, would you mind talking with us about how police surveillance isn't safety, especially for youth, and how it ultimately expands the school to prison pipeline deeper into our families and into our communities?
Absolutely. So I want to start first with just like the premise that surveillance isn't safety, and really like hone in on, especially after 9/11, 6 weeks later, the Patriot Act, and the federal government using that as a tool for more spying, especially on our Muslim and Arab siblings. And the reality that it actually did not generate more safety. In fact, it created a lot of harm in Muslim and Arab communities. And so that same effect, that same invasion of privacy really does exist for all of us. And I think that in this time, as we're watching a genocide on Palestine, increases in both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, it's really important to like ground ourselves in that history and understanding how surveillance technology like expanded and how it is existing in the world. And the reality is, we already know the carceral system, the criminal punishment system, policing, in and of itself is already discriminatory, has disparate impact upon Black and Brown communities, that it can lead to more coercion, and that it honestly, there is a selective threat of law enforcement. They're not talking about expanding this technology into every community. The spaces where they're talking about expanding it are really in communities in Seattle that are low income, that are predominantly Black and Brown. There are a lot of queer and trans folks, and there may be a lot of houseless neighbors that are in that space. And so who is it that they're seeking to surveil, and and for what purpose? And we know that Seattle has a serious issue. In July of 2021, the Seattle Times reported that Seattle police stopped Black people and Native Americans at a far higher rate than our white counterparts. That is statistically provable. And we know that pretextual stops where there is some presumption or an assumption that someone did something, that is often based upon, we'll say you had a broken tail light or something didn't match up on your license plate, whatever. They'll use that to stop us. And more likely than not, they don't find anything on us. So the likelihood that surveillance technology is actually going to increase those kinds of stops, increase the disparate impact of the problems of the policing and carceral system upon our communities, is incredibly high. And we already see that in cities that have a wide use of surveillance technology. And they're telling us the surveillance technology is to keep us safe. And they're giving it to the same institution that we're told is meant to keep us safe. And reality is, we do not see more safety in the city of Seattle. So why would we give more tools to the institution that is failing to deliver on its promise, right? Rather than investing in the things that we do know make people safe, they're choosing to go the exact opposite direction. So to Auntie's plea and Nia's plea of like, we should slow down and make choices that reflect what we know generates safety, I think everything behind this already tells us that this is not going to work. But when we're talking about young people in particular, and we're thinking about how this expands the school to prison pipeline, one of the top things that come up for our youth are like, electronic home monitoring is usually a GPS system, and it tracks everywhere a whole family goes, everywhere that young person goes, and it invites the state deeper into a family's home, and it provides a lot of data where about where that young person is, where their family is, where anyone they're with is. And to Beryl's point around that invasion of privacy, gives a lot of data to an institution that already lacks in accountability, and is usually not transparent about how it's using that data. When we think about license plate readers or CCTV, or even these microphones that can pick up any conversation, what are those conversations going to be used to do, and for what purpose, and who's ultimately going to be targeted by those items? And so especially for youth, young people say wild things that they don't mean. They could just be playing around or moving in space. And we know that Black bodies, Black young people are regularly targeted just simply for being Black. And so combine that with a technology that is just picking up on individual conversations that maybe have no meaning or no context. What the likelihood that young people will be further targeted and pushed into the school to prison pipeline is very high. The other end of this is these technologies usually come with some sort of like automated algorithm that determines who is the highest risk. And those algorithms are based upon literally what society already functions on, which is racism and anti-Blackness and classism and transphobia and homophobia. So those algorithms, when they pick up on things, are going to translate back into the same patterns and behaviors that often humans are displaying in those same institutions. So in reality, we are giving a failing institution that is not delivering on its promise of public safety, never has, no matter how much more money and how much more tools and how much more militarized it becomes. We are giving them more tools to continue this ineffective model of public safety, coercion, and disparate impact upon communities that have been suffering that for a long time. So if we were really to take seriously safety in our city, rather than investing any amount of money, whether it's 1 million or 200 million in this technology, we would reverse course and invest in the things that we know intervene, interrupt, and prevent harm. So I'll leave it there.
The piece that's sitting with me right now is I've been on house arrest and I never thought about bringing the GPS into my house and them tracking every place that my family went. And I'm having a really, really hard time shaking that. Like I had this question. I was like, yeah, okay, I can see that. I'm a victim of the school to prison, a survivor of the school to prison pipeline. I get that. But that is kind of creepy. And to exponentially make that worse. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. These technologies impact everyone, and you see, parents' movements, educators' movements. Everyone connected to that young person's movements are being tracked and filtered into a system that is entirely unchecked and is not transparent about how it uses that data, which then expands the family policing system and the welfare system and young people being taken out of their families' homes, and actually takes us farther from what the goal of those systems should be, which is like family unification, family wholeness, resolution, I'm never gonna use the word rehabilitation, but restoration. Like these are the things that we want to achieve, and each of these systems actually take us farther away from that, and they increase the likelihood that we will continue to perpetuate violence in our communities rather than stop it and intervene on it. And each of these technologies does that in its own way when it starts tracking people's movements, because we know that a pretextual stop of a person based on sight is just going to become an even wider array of pretextual stops based on something some random technology picked up, because we know ShotSpotter picks up any loud noise, not just gunshots, right? And then automatically you're calling now all these cop cars to a location where they're presuming a gun went off. It could have been a hammer or anything making a loud noise. And now you have highly escalated folks with guns who do not hesitate to pull those guns on Black and brown folks or even our houseless relatives, going into a situation that doesn't call for that. No situation really does. And the likelihood that we're going to see people harmed gravely increases.
Sitting with that for a moment. Thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Ion. Thank you, Nia. I do think that it's important that we stay focused on the fact that surveillance technology is not harm reduction, that it actually causes harm. And I think that's what y'all have communicated with us. And something that am definitely interested in, and I'm pretty sure that everybody who is coming here to the live stream today is interested in, we've done a really good job of laying out, one, what is the tech? Two, what are the problems that are associated with the tech? Three, right, humanizing the impact that this tech is going to have, because they've been separating the human impact, which is exactly what the tech does, is it separates humans from humans and causes a feedback loop of harm. So we've done a pretty good job of that. But what I really want to hear about is, what are the things that actually work, as Nikita has been alluding to. What have members of our community come up with to address harm, to solve conflict, and to make policing and incarceration obsolete? Now, we haven't beat the system all the way, but for some people, and I know for those people that it has made a huge difference to both them and their families, that has made the system obsolete in their lives. So rather than run the city, rather than the city of Seattle spending millions of dollars on surveillance technology, our community would be better served by investing in the people. Definitely. Mr. Davis, we're hearing the mayor, some council members, and even some Black leaders calling for ShotSpotter as a way to address gun violence, specifically in Rainier Beach. What concerns does this proposal raise for you? And can you share the ways you have seen investments in our community provide meaningful change? I'm especially curious for you to describe Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place, and why you believe it fits into all of this.
Yeah, let me first say that don't forget, this is a corporate product. Okay, we got a corporation that's behind this, a corporation that's trying to find loopholes to pay taxes, not paying its fair share. And what this is essentially doing is contributing to the underinvestment of our communities, right? And so the thing that concerns me, I was trying to find the appropriate word for it, deviousness of these corporations in introducing this technology. I've heard commercials, zingers on the tail end of Lowe's commercials, for instance. Don't forget to visit our technology section and check out our ShotSpotter technology, right? I'm just trying to position the public to see this thing in a little different way. I've actually seen the ShotSpotter corporation place an applicant in a interview pool for the gun violence prevention director that Public Health Seattle King County was hiring for. They actually placed someone in the interview pool while they were still an employee at that corporation. So, you know, this deviousness is definitely a concern. I think the other issue is, you know, just the undermining of the time and investment of the work that the community has put in on this, and in many cases in partnership with the city. You know, we've been able to utilize methodologies, youth and neighborhood engagement, guardianship, basically beautification. And the first year of deploying those, we saw incidents that contributed to youth crime go down the first year by 40%. We've seen economic empowerment. We actually hire our young people to implement these non-arrest crime intervention methodologies. 15 to 18-year-olds able to earn, maybe not seem like a lot to a lot of people, but up to $10,000 a year. Talking about the impact of their households that the methodologies that we've been deploying have been able to have. We've seen a building of community efficacy and community engagement. So one of the things that we're also saying is that, and we use this term, our tech is better than that tech. Our tech are young people, their ingenuity, they're geniuses. And so imagine right now, we been able to get the results that we've been able to get. We deploy 8 young people a week. They activate 1 location per day, 4 days a week. And I think that's somewhere around $300. You know, this $1.8 million they're talking about, we could hire 32 young people to activate 4 days a week, 4 locations a week for 2 years. And imagining the impact that that's going to have on their readiness for careers, on their ongoing commitment to the community. And so this is where the Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth comes in, because it is a coalition of other organizations. Boys and Girls Club does the Southeast Safety Network, and they operate the Be Safe Bros, doing guardianship. We do the corner greeters, youth and neighborhood engagement. We have a team that does crime prevention through environmental design, where we've been able to innovate it to where now there are 4 levels of it. First level is litter pickup. Second level is using a Find It, Fix It app to report violations of dumping and that kind of thing. The third level is cutting back shrubs and overgrowth. And then the fourth level is beautification. And so these things were designed by young people. This is something that they've come up with to be able to implement to make this impact. So to have an initiative like Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth in place to continue to push back against these kinds of forces that we've already seen aren't proving to be to work is a real concern. And it's fine time in our minds why now the data we're collecting is of no value, and they're going to try to choose something whose data hasn't proven to be effective. So that's how we're kind of seeing it and doing it, and what we're concerned about.
Thank you. I'm hearing lots of real important elements like value, added benefit, connection, community, caring for the space that are around us, giving us pride, sense, integrity, like all of these things that are built in. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Davis, but I thought y'all were tracking about like a 30% decrease in what was going on in the neighborhood prior to the corner greeters and the other programs that you've been working on. Is that close to right?
Yeah, the first year we deployed all of these methodologies, it decreased by 40%, and we've been able to hold it steady up to that point. In fact, there are a couple of these locations that the researchers call them hotspots, but we refer to them as pearls, where there were no incidents. Light Rail Station is actually one of them, and also the Rose Street in Rainier. So yeah, impact has been obvious.
Mm-hmm. The genius of the young folks that you're working with. Thank you. We want to see this continue. This is beautiful and powerful. And I know that we're running close to the end of our time. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to offer to everyone else. Ion, you've been engaged for several years in restorative justice work. Let me start over. You've been engaged for several years in restorative justice work in the community with several groups and organizations. Would you share with us what that has been like and the kind of difference it has made and continues to make, as well as some of the hurdles to having a greater impact? What I'm thinking of specifically is about how groups that are underfunded are expected to come up with solutions in like 5 minutes, and it just go without any money, any resources, or any backing.
Yeah, honestly, for me, I think Gregory said it best. We know where the answers are. It's laying in community. It's laying with young people. It's laying with people that did this work. And they know it on some level too, because every now and then they throw you some crummies. And it's really crummies, is what I call it. Because after that, they're asking for results like exactly as quickly as they gave it to you. Um, and then they want to blame, they start the whole blaming stuff. I think many times law enforcement and others are giving grace. But what folks fail to understand is if that system was going to make us safe, we would have been safer already. Because that's been in place forever. But really, if the answer is within us, why not trust it? And why not give time for healing to really effectively start? Don't just give us a 1 or 2. Really give it the time that it's due. So if you're the county and you gave it, honor it. Sit back and watch. Invest in it for 10 years because it took decades that got us here. Don't do that quick fix. And since it's really Bruce and everybody else from the city, they also are funding some stuff too. And I'm really asking people to continue to do the work with community. So when you're giving money to safety, honor it by continuing it. Don't just do that little quick fix of, okay, so we gave him some, we're going to start cutting back because that money was really for law enforcement. No, it wasn't. It was our money. Because really, serve and what? Protect, right? Right. Mm. Mine never got protected. Mine got protected by having a Nikita in my life, having a Mr. Davis in my life, having these people in our worlds. That's where our protection was. That's where our assets were. So really, our assets are our people. We need to trust our people to do the work and invest in our people. And then I'm actually going to even speak up the Office of Immigrant, because that's another group that's trying to do safety, but is so heavily underfunded. I mean, so heavily underfunded. So when you have a whole department that you're asking them to do certain things, we then need to listen to those people and say, okay, here's the money. This is really what's going to be allocated to y'all. Because these pilots, there's no such thing as a pilot anything. Let's be real. When you're piloting anything, you already know there's an issue going on. So if you're waiting for the solution, give it really not only the due time, but give it legitimacy of having some assets behind it. I could go on and on and on. The data is there. I know it because we give it to them every day. If you were listening to Gregory, he told you the data. If you were listening to Nikki, we can all give you the data. And these institutions have the data because it was given to them over and over and over. They can see it. But we got used to certain things. And we got to unpack our stuff. We got to unpack the relationships that always harm us too. And law enforcement has never been my friend. So I'm going to pass it to the next.
I knew you were going to tell it like it is, Zion. You always do. Um, that's why I like hearing the truth. I like being upfront. And what I heard a whole lot was like, you give us a little bit, and then you don't give us the time. And what they want is an immediate resolution to something that took generations to create. And it takes time when we're talking about people to people, that's being done in a non-violent way, um, in a healing, harm reductive way. Because you know, I know when I was coming out of it, like I didn't immediately learn how not to swear. I didn't immediately learn how not to use vulgar language that was defaming the people that I was saying that I cared about. Right. And then if they would have thrown me away because I didn't learn how to drop the B word so quickly, I wouldn't have the community around me that I have today. So like that quick shift, and if it is anything more. And so with that, I'd love to transition over to creative justice, because the way that I have seen the work that y'all are doing, and I'm not on the inside, is that creative justice is getting directly in the way of the pipelines that are putting people behind bars and leading to the criminalization in our community. And would love to hear a little bit about how y'all are approaching the work and what it means and what the impacts have been.
For sure. The work that we do is not about perfection. Um, it is about working alongside young people, families, our communities, our staff, to build the skills necessary to, I keep saying these three things, but prevent, intervene, and heal harm when it occurs. Um, I appreciate how Mr. Davis started, because we spend obscene amounts of money on a quote unquote public safety system that doesn't work, while we know there are things in community that are very effective. And We do not move as a society, like here in Seattle and King County. We're often not moving on social science. We're moving on a political whim. We're moving on what we think makes those with money and those who are 4-4 voters feel comfortable and safe. And it is an illusion of safety. It is not the reality of safety. And so the work that we strive to do at Creative Justice is first, you know, young people are making choices. We all make choices. One of the things that astounded me in law school was drug use across communities is actually very much the same in all communities. And yet there are certain communities that get in the media and in the political sphere made to seem like we have higher uses of substances. The difference is white and wealthy communities have the safety of using their substances in their home. They have the access to substance abuse programs. They usually have their basic needs met. So being able to address substance use in a liberatory harm reduction manner is so much easier when you have your basic needs addressed, right? And so when we look, if we know that drug use across communities is the same, then what is the difference? Well, if you're Black, brown, poor, or without a home, you do not have the basic things that allow you to address substance use in a healthy way. And so we could think about that across all kinds of spheres of safety, whether we're talking about interpersonal violence or systemic violence, or if we're talking about neurodiverse communities and what each of us need based on how our brains and how our emotions work. Having your basic needs met is just like the very baseline of being able to live, being able to survive. And so part of our work with young people is with the 65 youth that we have in our program right now is how can we support you in changing as many conditions around your life as possible, withstanding that I don't have $410 million a year like Seattle Police Department. If I had $410 million a year, y'all, I could fund creative justice for over 125 years if I just raw do the math, right? And similar to what Mr. Davis is saying, every 10 weeks, we are putting $65,000 into the hands of young people and their families. Every 10 weeks, which means young people have better access to food. Their families are more able to pay their rent. They are less worried about where they're going to sleep. And so when you are living agitated, the likelihood that you're going to make a decision that either causes harm to yourself or other people is just so much higher. So our goal is, how can we support young people and their families in stabilizing in their housing, stabilizing in their food access, stabilizing in their access to mental health and physical care? And that in and of itself is already a very significant decreaser in interpersonal violence. The next level to that is like, once you start to stabilize, you have the ability to dream for your life. What are the possibilities? What more can you be doing? Where will you go next? And just having the opportunity to dream and think about what's next changes your relationship to other people and yourself. You're generally less likely to cause harm when you have a vision for your future. And so the next layer to that is like, how do we support young people and their families in achieving that vision? Because when that vision becomes much more accessible, again, you are just less likely to engage in behavior that causes harm. And I don't say that to put it on the individual, because in the just world, everybody would have that from jump. And if we all were able to move from that position in life, so much violence that we experience in our communities would gravely decrease. But I want to go back to something I said before, which is, when it comes to humans, some amount of hurt and harm is inevitable. None of us are perfect. And so if we're operating from the place that we are not perfect, then what skills are we imparting on ourselves and each other to heal harm when it occurs? Do I know how to exit an argument in a way that restores the relationship? When something harmful happens to me, do I know how to restore that relationship rather than resulting to retaliation? If I don't have access to the resource to restore that relationship, do I know a circle keeper? Do I know a mediator? Do I know skills for de-escalating or calming myself down? And these are tools or tactics that we partner with young people at Creative Justice to build. And we often do it through arts, therapeutic spaces where youth can process their triggers and process their experiences, build up these skills and their tools. And one of the things that is the most powerful to me is seeing two young people that come from two different sets or cliques or two different hoods come into space, and they negotiate their own space safety, and peace with each other. We have literally seen beef squash that could have resulted to gun violence because young people had the skills to negotiate their care for themselves and their care with each other, and came to the being able to say, wow, this space provides me with basic needs support. This space provides me with connectedness and family. This space provides me with safety. And the last thing I want to do is disrupt it with the violence that's on the outside. And so they use the skills that they're gaining to negotiate both peace in this space and then peace when they're out in the street. So young people who once were beefing with each other are no longer beefing with each other. And they did that themselves with the skills. So it really is multifaceted. And to finish on what Auntie Ayan said is, in 2020, it was the uprisings of community and the organizing of folks like Mr. Davis and Auntie Ayan that convinced the city to give a certain amount of money towards community-based strategies that develop safety infrastructure. That work is not done. And we have a city council right now that is not only talking about investing in things like ShotSpotter, but is talking about divesting from these projects that we've only been working on for 4 years. 4 years is not enough time to build the level of in-community safety that we need through these community-based programs for 750,000 people in our city. So if we are real, if we are serious about building public safety systems that work for everyone, not just wealthy, white, comfortable voters, if we're serious about building it for everyone, it takes more than a 4-year investment, and it will require investing more rather than investing less. So as we get towards a city council budget and we win not having this money invested in ShotSpotter, I also hope that community will show up and continue to demand that our city invest in those community-based resources that actually get to preventing, interrupting, and healing harm when it occurs.
Yeah, I think that's right to clap. I think you just did my closing. And thank you. So often when we're having these conversations, especially like about tech and whatnot, the conversation sits squarely on what the state is proposing. It sits squarely on the technology itself. And we were very intentional today when we built out this panel to make sure that we are highlighting what is going on in our community right now and who is doing the work. Not only do we have to resist things like all of this surveillance city stuff, but the folks who have been speaking with us today, Ayan and Nikita and Mr. Davis and Beryl and Nia, are out here actually doing the work to make the difference in the community. And we wanted to make sure that we were imparting upon our community things that are shown to be solutions. And we felt that that was very important. So with that, I'm very grateful, and I'm sure that everybody who is still here on the live stream is grateful, and all of the Seattle Solidarity Budget team is grateful that for all of our speakers today, Ion, Mr. Davis, Nikita, Nia, and Beryl, to all the folks helping on the back end to make sure that the stream went well, to everyone who helped pull this webinar together, for the folks that were right on top of the surveillance impact report and the racial equity toolkit that was just dropped on us at the beginning of this month so that we could form an active and strong resistance to it quickly. They tried to just sweep it right under the rug like nobody was going to pay attention, and then it was all of a sudden going to be in there. To make these three, and for everybody who has signed on to the endorsement letter that we're getting ready to give to the city of Seattle tomorrow. We've given them the first version before. And up on the screen right now, and you can come back to this video later because it's going to be remaining online, but these are the links to all of the organizations that were a part of this panel here today. And if you'd like to check in with them, please support them, do all the things that we need in order to take care of ourselves. Would you move to the next slide? So we've got some next steps because we're not done beating this thing yet. But please take action with us. We invite you to join us tomorrow at the Bitter Lake Community Center at 6 p.m. for public comment. There are also options for you to do it via, online or via telephone. And if you look at our CTA, our background, tinyurl.com/community-not-tech, community not tech. If you get there, you'll find the links that'll help you to show up for the public comment however you can, however you are able to. And you will see all the information that you need there, including instructions on how to sign up for public comment and sample scripts. And we encourage you all to share from your own hearts, like everybody here today has been doing, and your own experience and your own thoughts and your own feelings, to really make it human, make it tangible, and make it real in as many ways as possible. We've got the data, we're showing them the data, and they're rejecting the data. But when we have the data with the real people impacts, it makes a difference. Also, please make sure to make comments on the technology pages. The three are listed there: the AGLS comment form, the CCTV comment form, and the RTCC comment form by 5 p.m. on the 29th, because that's when those comments are going to be closed, and we need to make sure that as many of us are talking to them as possible. It is important that we stop this technology before it is implemented, because it will be notoriously difficult for us to disentangle it once it is. Again, the call to action with the links and all the information is tinyurl.com/community-not-tech. And if you're connected with us, then you've already seen all of that stuff. And with that, we are grateful for everyone who attended this evening. We're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at the Bitter Lake Community Center at 6 p.m. All power to the people. We hope everyone has a great and wonderful night. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all of our panelists.